Hi, Melissa Berg here. Well, I've finally done it. I have created a follow-up to my How to Use Autodesk Sketchbook video. After collecting some of your questions and learning a few things in the last 2 years since I've been using the program, I have created 10 tips for using Autodesk Sketchbook. These are in-depth tips to help you more easily navigate the program. I will cover everything from clipping masks, gradient maps, selection tools, perspective grids, blend modes, and even how to utilize brush settings. Plus, if you stay to the very end, I might even have a bonus tip for you. If you know exactly what you are looking for, I will create a list with the timestamps down below in the description. Great, let's get started. Here are 10 tips for how to use Autodesk Sketchbook. Number 1, document sizes. All right, you have a project you want to do, great ideas swirling in your head. What is the first thing you have to do? Well, you have to pick your document size. So you hit plus here and you go to new sketch and you have, well, I don't know what I want. It's just these weird numbers. It's not inches or centimeters. It has presets. Okay, well, let's do the highest one here, screen resolution. That matches my iPad Pro here. That's the screen resolution of an iPad. I'll click that. Okay, hit create. Great, now I can start drawing. I want to use the basic default pencil. Now I want to do, let's say you want to do a nice detailed sketch, and you want details to be tiny. You want to get in there, so you want your brush size to be super tiny. You want to zoom in and see all the details you've created. So you start working and you're like, it's still kind of big. I mean, sure, it's great for a quick sketch, but I need to get in there and make tiny little shapes. So now you want to zoom in. And you're thinking, well, that's not tiny. I'm down to less than a pixel. Why is this? And now it's faded. That's not quite what I want. I'm pushing as hard as I can here. And it's just not giving me these nice, tiny, detailed little lines like a real pencil would. So how do you fix this? You need to make a document that is much bigger than your screen resolution. Yes, you can do this. I don't care what you've seen in Google, if you've Googled or forums or, I have seen people say that you can't, but that's not true. You can, because I've done it. So let's get rid of this. Gallery, discard, blah, don't want that, not working. You can see here I have an image that is 5400 by 8100 pixels. Sketchbook uses pixels, but I want to make a book cover for a trade paperback that's traditionally a size is 6 by 9 inches. Well, that's not very big to work with when you're drawing. So what I did was I tripled that, 18 by 27. That's basically poster size. But that still doesn't tell me how to tell Sketchbook that size. And I don't want to just say 18 by 27 inches. I also need to tell it resolution size. So how many pixels are in each inch, or if you're using centimeters. You need to tell Sketchbook how many pixels to do per inch. That's what that number is. So in every square inch, you have 5400 by 8100 pixels. That's a lot. I'll open this and I will show you. Takes a while to open because it is a big project. I will show you the difference. But if I zoom in, look how far I can zoom in. I can zoom in really tightly here. And you can literally see, like in the forehead, in her eyelashes, eyebrows, you can see my fine lines. And I am really zoomed in here. So, you know, this is for all of us who have aging eyes and you want to be able to get in really close. Or you just have that very tiny detail, like the dots on the reflections in her eyes, you know, or her teeth or whatever. If you want to get in there and really create those details, you need very high aspect ratios, pixel counts. So we will go out of here and, well, okay, I know what size I want, but how do I figure out how many pixels that is? If you have Affinity Photo or Affinity Designer or any of the Photoshop programs on your computer, you can put your dimensions in and you can figure out what pixel size that would be. Or you can use this website. I found this website. I don't know anything else about this company, but uproar.com, uproer.com, they seem to have this really nice image size calculator. Now they only use inches, so if you're in another country other than the US and you want to use centimeters, you just need to first convert centimeters to inches. I haven't found if there is another calculator out there that uses other metrics. So then you want to do, I need inches to pixels, oops, right there, and I want to put in 300 dpi, it's already in there, and I need it 18 by 27, and it figures it out for you, 5400 by 8100. So that is what I need to tell Sketchbook. So I will hit the plus, I will say new sketch, I will choose 5400 is my width, done, by 8100. Now, a trade paperback is a little bit longer than a standard poster size, so when I do a poster size, I pick 5400 by 7200. So that's the same as 18 by 24 at 300 dpi. This is also 300 dpi. Now, you do have to manage your space on your iPad if you're going to work in very large sizes. I have a first generation iPad Pro with only 32 gigs of RAM, so that's not a lot of space nowadays. I have to manage my photos and my music, and I try not to have too many games on here at a time. Anytime I'm recording these videos, if I get to a certain point, I have to upload them to my computer before I can continue, because they do take up a lot of space. So now when I create this document, and I get in here with my pencil, my lines are much smoother. They look more like real pencil lines. I can make it very tiny and still see them. They also seem to react much better to my pressure. Tip number 2, flat colors and why you need them. Now, of course, there's always an exception to the rule. If you're going to be painting in a traditional style with, say, watercolor or a translucent kind of oil brush style, or even just pencil, like this picture here, you need something behind it. Now, apparently, there's a white background here, it looks like, right? But it's not actually part of the drawn image. It is separate, and I will show you why that is. So this background is sort of a working, it's not a full background, it's just a working background. So you can change the color of your canvas to be easier on the eyes, or to see what works, or just, you know, to be more customizable. But I cannot merge this with the one beneath it. I would have to do a couple of things. Now you could just add a layer, put it underneath this one. You could use the paint bucket. I will choose white and I will fill. I'm just tapping anywhere, and now you have a white background. How do I know that? If I turn this one off, it's still there. If I turn this one off, you will see that it is transparent, and it's completely transparent. If I delete this one that I just created and I change this to any color, let's say I wanted a nice kind of dark blue to make it look like it's going to be night out or moonlight, it changes the whole thing, her skin, everything. And if you are using a translucent type paint, this is especially important when you're using pencil, obviously here, but if you're doing a translucent style paint, and I like to paint with this one in a natural blend brush type. Standard is a little bit more opaque, but not completely. And as you can see, this brush, let's change the color. This brush has a nice texture to it. And you can see the background through it. Now, this is with the opacity all the way up. So even if I turn this to standard, which is slightly more opaque, you just don't get that texture, but you could still see the background. And you can see how your other colors bleed through. And every time you pick up your brush, you get these harsh lines. That's why I like to use the natural blend. It's a lot more like using real paint. Because, you know, especially watercolor. When you're painting with watercolor, the wetness of the paint and your paper it bleeds into your other lines. So it kind of gives you this blended effect. You don't really get these harsh lines unless you're using something like marker or a very thick paint. Okay, so that's one reason why you would want some kind of flat, solid background that's not just a painted background. No matter how solid you try to make it, you can fake it a little bit. Let's say you want to use this, I'll use this airbrush one, and I have it on standard, and I have the flow and the opacity up all the way. Everything up. And now I could paint back here, but it does still show through because I'm using pencil. Now if I add another layer and I pick a new color, see, it does cover it quite well, but because it has soft edges, there will be areas where it can still show through. So you could potentially just go like this and put in some kind of solid background. It could be white, it can be any color you want it to be. Personally, what I like to do, and it's faster than just coloring it in like this, is I think of this another way. The great masters of the past, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Caravaggio, they used to do an underpainting. And that's what I try to use these flats as. Now you don't have to have more than one color, but I use more than one color just to get in my shadow tones and my highlight tones, or if I have different lighting effects like I do actually in this painting, I can get those in there quickly. And I also like how those colors kind of blend together in the middle, and I will show you what I mean with that. So what I tend to do, and now this is using the selection tool, and I will get more into that and all the different uses of the selection tool later, but I can either go around the whole thing with the lasso, but I'm not going to do that. I instead am going to use the magic wand, and I will select the white anywhere. And as you can see, it selects, it's not perfect, as you can see up here by her cloak above her arm, it goes into the drawing. Now I could fix that. Technically, I could turn this off. I could go to my pencil, use black, make sure I have black selected, make sure it's not too small from before. I can go in here and because it's a very grainy textured brush, it has holes in it, and also some of these are not connected completely. So where it's really light, you might want to just make it a better line here, a more defined line, and that it's all connected, so that when I come back in here now and I select it, see, now it's including all of that. Now the way I use it, that doesn't really matter to me too much. There's other ways around that. So what I do is I just select it quickly, and now it's not selecting the other side of the horse here. So if you hit this plus and then tap on the white there, it selects that along with the other side. I'm also going to do up here by the mane. And now obviously there's some holes here in areas, but I'm not going to worry about those for this purpose. So now the outside, all the white areas are actually selected. I want the inside selected, so I hit inverse, and now I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to bring that underneath the drawing. And now I'm going to take my paint bucket, and I'm going to add a nice color. And since she's very light skinned, and this works actually for any skin tone, these darker shades of purples and like a plum color look really nice. You can also go with something that's a little bit more brownish orange, but I really like the dark plum colors. They look really nice for shadows on skin tone. Now peach, the opposite of peach, is kind of a blue, so you learn contrast colors are good for shadows, and that's true, and shadows do tend to be very blue. But when you start blending the peach colors with the little bit of the blue, when they start merging together, you can get kind of a grayish charcoaly color that you don't want. So it tends to look a little bit more charcoal. So if you're laying these colors on top of each other, like you might say with real paint, you'll get that kind of look, and it'll kind of lose its color. And I like these colors to really kind of show through in the shadows. So, and because there's blood under the skin, it adds that warm tone to it. So there are times when you're going to want to use blue, but there's always exceptions. But overall, I like to start out with a warm tone for skin tones. So, and I could do the horse separate if I wanted to. I could use, instead of this magic wand, I could use the lasso and just carefully go around the areas I want. If I wanted a different color on the horse than I do on her, or her clothing different than her face, then I could do that, and I would have separate blocks of flat color. But for this purpose, I'm just going to do the one. So I'm going to take the paint bucket. I've got a new layer. So if you look at this new layer, even though I have her selected, if I turn her off, it's just an empty selection. There's nothing there until I do that. And I tapped inside, and now it filled everything. Now you do have these areas where the lines were a little fuzzier, but I'm not going to worry about that. That's fine for now. Now you could just start with this, put on your drawing, and start painting, and you have your flat color. You could use white again if you want. You don't have to use colors. I like to use 2 colors, sometimes 3, because I can quickly get the colors I need on here and then just start erasing out where I don't want that color to be. So let's do the peach. See, now it's a nice flat opaque color, and it has completely covered that plum color, which is still there. And then now because I have these two colors here, I'm actually going to turn off. I'll leave the selection on for now just because I want to show you something, but I'm going to bring the darker one over the peach in this case, and then I'm going to turn the purple one down a little bit. I change the opacity so you get some nice color in the mid-tones, okay? And then now I can just, because there's more dark than light, that's why I put the dark one over the top of the light one. And then if I go to a textured eraser of some kind, that gives it kind of a, it just gives it sort of a, I can't even explain what the texture looks like. It has sort of a plaster color on it, or a plaster shape and texture to it. So these kind of show through here and there, and it just adds dimension to your painting. And then when you paint over the top of that again with more translucent paint, some of that will still show through. And this is just a style I've developed with real paint, and I've brought it into digital, and I just like doing that. So I would just come in here now and start erasing all the light areas like that. So that just gives you an idea. Now I'll go into blending modes later. That'll change what's happening with the way your color looks when you're using a black and white and then colorizing it. So this is always, I do this even when I just start painting and I just have a basic line drawing as my guides. So I'll put these darks in, and then I'll just sort of blend them so you don't have these real like obvious paintbrush strokes unless you want those, but this is my style, so I just like to smooth it out. And now you've got a nice basic underpainting start. But if you don't have these flats in here, it will change the look of the paint. So let me go back to that watercolor brush that I like to use, and let's even a dark color, let's go here. Let me make sure it's natural blend. Okay, so let's say I just start painting. Okay, I'm just painting. Let's say I don't have, maybe I have some basic pencil line guides, you know, for my drawing, and I just start painting and I'm liking this and I like it. Okay, oh, but I need something on in the background, or I need to just change the whole background. So I go and I change this to, I want a blue. It changes the look of this paint right here. So if you wanted it this color, you need to have some, like a white background behind there to start off with, so that if you make any changes underneath it, they don't show through. So it keeps the integrity of your color that you chose, and it won't disrupt what's already happening here. So if you make changes, see, let's say I even, you know, see, it just changes the whole look. It doesn't even look purple anymore. But if you look at these, they still are. That blue is not showing through anywhere, even under the area that I erased here in her face, because I have at least one layer of solid underneath. Okay, so that's how that works, and that's why I do it. I've had some people ask me questions about, why are you putting these flats, why not just start painting? And now there will be one other big reason why I've found that I've had to do something underneath. I've even had to go back because I forgot to start with something, and I just started painting under the pencil drawing, and then I was like, wait a minute, this, and it changed because I changed the background and I forgot. So I had to literally go through here and just outline with the lasso selection as close as I could, put the layer, you know, underneath, and then fill it in and clean it up afterwards. So see, now because that white is over this peach right there on her face, but it's under this purple, so it's also, you know, it's like a lighter version of that purple. It just lightens that purple. And you know, so this is also a good way to kind of adjust your colors and give yourself some more things to play with. You know, so there's lots of ways you can do it, and you know, it's just another tool, but you need at least one solid layer underneath. Tip number 3, how to use selection tools to create clipping masks and gradient maps along with color adjustments. Now, Sketchbook does not have clipping masks. I am in Procreate here. Procreate does. What do clipping masks do? Well, let's just look here. We have this shape. And let's say I want to make a clipping mask out of it. So use it for a clipping mask. So what I do is I create a layer above and I can select clipping mask. And you see the little arrow here shows up. Now, nothing appears to have changed, but let's pick a new color that's brighter here, or different. And now I'm still on that layer, that's a clipping mask layer. So when I paint over, it's basically recoloring it, okay? And that's really all it's doing. You can use these and export your project into Procreate, but one thing I noticed is Procreate cannot handle the same file sizes that Sketchbook can, which is quite surprising to me considering how powerful Procreate is, and you have to pay for it. Sketchbook is completely free. There was a painting in here I was working on, and I wanted to maybe use some of the shape brushes that Procreate has that Sketchbook does not, and it wouldn't let me just export it in there. So how can we do this in Sketchbook? Let's use that same picture. Let's turn this to white, and we'll just turn both of these off so we could see what we're working with. All right, so you have this nice, interesting shape here that is kind of complicated. It's got some light areas, some very translucent areas, and some thicker, darker areas, more opaque. Now, I could just create a new layer. I could, again, use the selection tool, magic wand, plus magic wand again, and then I could go on a new layer. I could use my paintbrush here. We need to invert that first, and then, you know, now it's just sort of, it just fills all this in. And that's not really what we want, right? It's being very slow. So, you know, it's not copying these. It kind of does a funny, I mean, it's doing some fine lines and it catches up. But, you know, if you wanted it to be more just like what you're looking at here, just like the original. So let's just delete this. Another thing you can do, let's say you wanted this, you want to keep the integrity, but you're like, I want it red, I don't want it this color. Okay, well, you don't need to do anything else. You don't need the selection tool. You click on the layer, there's this little lock button. If you lock it, that is an alpha lock. So now you can take your paintbrush, let's bring the size down a little, and you stay on that layer, and now you can recolor it, and you can mix colors. You know, if you're just careful where you're going, you can do different things, you know, get real detailed about it. I could technically do that with my drawing. Let's alpha lock that, and let's just go right in here. If I lighten this up a bit, see, it is only drawing where there is the image. But this is also changing that layer. So you got to remember that. A way you could do around that is you could duplicate this layer. See how it darkens it? And maybe just start to paint on that one. We need to alpha lock. Yep, that's already alpha locked just like the one because it just duplicated exactly everything about it. See, so it's just playing around with it, but it's, you know, the dark and lights are, it leaves the lights there, but it's not keeping the darks dark. And that's kind of annoying too. Okay, so let's just delete that one. There is one more thing you can do, and let me test this because this might not work with something that's black and white. You can change, yeah, see, it doesn't work when it's black and white. Am I on the right layer? Yeah, yeah. So if it's just black and white, it can't, there's no color to change the hue of. You can use color balance and use shadow. Click shadow up here at the top. And you can see a slight change, but it's just not quite doing it, right? So we could change this one. Instead of the alpha lock, you could go to color balance. You don't really see anything happening with that. It adjusts the colors that are already there. That blue is kind of changing, but let's go to the other one, the hue, saturation, and luminance adjustment. Now you can actually change the hues. Now it's changing all of the hues that we had played with, okay? So and then you can change how bright they are and how gray. So you can turn things all the way to grayscale if you would like. That sometimes comes in handy, how dark and light it is. I'm going to put this all the way back to whatever color it was originally. And it's a little different because I am using the paintbrush, and some of the color underneath is showing through a bit unless I press really hard. You know, so there's lots of fun ways to just change things and play with it. But notice how it leaves these lighter areas instead of turning them into solid. It doesn't try to turn it all one solid color the way the clipping mask in Procreate does. Or if you're just using the selection tools here. So now we can go back to this and change the hue, and now you're changing all of it. All right. So that's how that can work. You could also, so I remember when scrapbooking was a thing, I still did that. I don't know, is it still a thing? Does anybody do scrapbooking? I suppose using Instagram and using, you know, frames and Canva and, you know, playing around with those, that's kind of scrapbooking, right? Let's say you wanted like a vignette around your photograph, right? And you could do that in here too. You could do a couple things. So I'll delete this and I'm going to add a new layer. And let's just figure out how we want our vignette to look. All right, let's say I wanted it kind of an oval shape. Okay, let's use the circle, the ellipse. I'm going to spin it around like that. Then I'll just take pencil, make sure it's black, dark, draw around it. It is drawing only on the circle. That's what's nice about these little guides. It reminds me, especially the one here in the middle, the curve ruler. I haven't really played with this much. You can play around with it to, like, if you want a perfect line, let's say you're doing lettering or something, and this predictive stroke thing just isn't quite enough. Or let's say you're doing a car. If you've been to art school, you may have heard of French curves. They're these plastic curvy things that have all these different types of curves on them, and you have to, I was never very good with them. And you have to just sort of line them up and then use them to, you know, draw against, and then it helps you create a nice line. But I don't really use that. I use the ruler occasionally and this circle. So there's my circle. Turn that off. You can see it here. It's on this separate layer. I'm going to use the magic wand selection tool again. We are going to select. Is it doing it? Let's turn this off so it's not adding. There. So it's selecting everything outside that circle, which is exactly what I want. So now I don't want that line drawing of the circle, I'm going to add one more layer, and then I'm going to hit fill. Yeah, let's just fill with black. There, now we have a vignette, okay, and it's over the top of that. But one thing that I wish, now this is something they could totally do, but they don't, is feathering. So what I have to do is either take the textured eraser that has a real nice kind of soft area, or the blending brush that I like to use. Yeah, you know, that's kind of like feathering. That's the thing about Sketchbook. It's sort of like a digital version of real paint. I mean, you don't have feathering in real paint. You'd have to do something like this anyway. So yeah, you can, you know, kind of hand do it. You do it by hand. You get the softer edge. You can play with it, and I need to erase more, you know, whatever. Here's the eraser. So those are different choices. You could also do shapes. Let's say I've seen them, you know, in scrapbooking. You would do like make your painting look like it was brushed on. So, you know, so that it has uneven teared edges or whatever. So what you could do is, instead of this, you could do kind of just a fun shape. All right, I just did a sloppy version of one of those things that would probably, you know, include her face normally. So I could do that, and then again, wand, the magic wand selection tool again. So see, now we have this shape, right? So now we go to that layer, we open up the layer options, hit clear, and now it's just that area you painted in. And again, it does not have the nice feathered edges, but this kind of has a neat teared paper effect because it's using the alpha information from this brush. So, you know, and you can see this is, let's turn this off. There, see? So, you know, you can use masks. It does work like masks. So it's not, just because it's not called a mask doesn't mean you can't do it. So this gave me a nice, neat kind of textured paper there, torn paper look. So yeah, there's lots of interesting ways to use these selection tools in different ways here. So let's turn that one off and turn this one back on. So there's lots of different ways to utilize the select tools. Another thing you can do is use them to move things around. So let's take the lasso, and let's say I'm just going to, this is in the purple, so I'm just going to go around a shape. Okay, I can cut it, add a new layer, and paste it, and then you get the transform tool, so if I want to, I can move it. That's one way to do it. Let's say you didn't like where the placement of something, and you can totally do that. I mean, I could go around her face and move her head or something. I mean, I could do the whole thing. You could have this selected here. Okay, it's still selected and it's in the right, back in the right spot. You could just go straight to the transform tools and move it like that. You could also change where it's sitting. So like if you're working with, you want some symmetry, like I was doing some angel wings the other day, I made just one of them, and then I duplicated it and just hit that and popped it over, and it was a nice even, you know, moves it like exactly even. You can flip it around and you can warp it and change the size. You can even, let's go back, undo. See, that was just a one-time undo because it doesn't save what you did until you hit done. I could clear it. So that works really nice for erasing like out large sections. The only thing that I really wish it could do, because I've run into, let's say you have fabric and part of it is wet, so you need whatever's underneath, like if it's on skin, you need it to kind of show through, right? because like if it's a light color, it's going to be slightly more transparent than the rest of it because it's wet. So I wish it could change the opacity of that selection. I swear when I first got this about 2 years ago, it did that, and then one day I was trying to do it again and it didn't work. And so what they did is they sent me, you know, I asked them, I'm like, I think this is broken. Is there something, you know, I'm doing wrong here? What happened to this? It used to do this, it's not doing it anymore. So they sent me a little video showing me how to do it. And obviously I could have figured this out myself, but it's not broken. It just doesn't do it anymore. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it never did it. But this is another way to adjust the opacity of just a small section. So again, we have it selected. We go here and we hit cut, create a new layer, hit paste. Now it's on that layer. Hit done because we don't want it to move, right? The opacity has changed. It went to solid because this layer is all the way up to 100. Now we can just adjust that section. You do get this harsh line. So what I've had to do in the past then, after changing the opacity, I then merge, not merge all, never do that until you're completely finished. I merge it with the one so they're kind of connected again, but then I have to kind of blend, that's too big, blend this line a little bit just to make them blend together. And if it's a subtle change, this blends much nicer. You know, like if you're making something slightly more translucent because it looks wet like a piece of fabric and it's showing light through it more. Because again, they don't have feather, which is, it would be much nicer if the selection tools had feather options, and then this would blend together much nicer when you had to cut and paste it back in. So that's a workaround. Not necessarily a feature, it's just a workaround. Okay, let's go back to this one, and I'm going to show you how to do gradient maps with these selection tools. So let's get this, we're going to turn that one off. We're down here on this layer, and now this time, because it's a nice solid color, I'm going to use the magic wand again and select that, the inside. So now it's a nice clean selection. I'm going to make a new layer. I'll turn this one off. And now under our paint bucket, we have these gradients. We got linear and we got radial fill. I'll show you the linear fill. So what you do is, if you know how a gradient works, you need to tell it the direction the gradient is going. So I'm going to start at the top outside the selected area and drag down. See, now it's got the lightest, it's a circle up here, the lightest one on top, a mid-range color at the bottom, and the darkest one here. Now you can add some, so let's add one there. I'm going to add one here. You can adjust where it is. I'm going to click on that, and you can see when you click on them, it shows you the color in your little puck here. As you can see, it just does automatically white to dark in the grays. But we can pick any of these in the puck here and change the color. See? Really cool. You can also, let's say you wanted the very top to be white. Bring it down a little, bring this up. There. But you say this is not a gradient map, Melissa. This is just a gradient. Well, we can make it a gradient map, can't we? Okay, well, let's see how we do that. Let's say this is exactly what we want. It's the right angle. Everything is what we want. So we're done with it. Let's turn off the paint bucket. Turn off the selection tools. Got this really cool shape. And we turn this back on. Oh, look at that. There you go. It's a gradient map, right? And you can be as detailed as you want. I mean, if you just wanted to do the horse, we'll just select out the horse shape and apply your gradient or your color, and there you go, just like we were doing before with these background colors with the flats, right? But you say that's not quite a gradient map. I mean, the dark of the pencil is still black, right? It is. You're right. You're exactly right. Which then brings us to tip number 4, blending modes. Blending modes are very cool. I use overlay all the time when I am doing these pencil drawings, because I like to first do all my detail in pencil, as you see here, and then color it without damaging the pencil that is actually sitting on top of all the color. And it's actually much faster once you get the painting part. You know, the pencil part will take longer, but the painting of it, the color, the adding the color goes very fast. And this is why, because I don't have to worry about the details as much, just the placement of where the color is supposed to go. And that's why I start with those, you know, a dark shade and a light shade of the underpainting of your flats, and I quickly erase out what I need, and you know, get those highlights and shadows in there faster, and or lighting the colors, like if I have really specific lighting, like blue on one side and orange on the other, which I kind of like to do. I'm kind of obsessed with that right now. Turquoise and orange looks so cool together. It's probably because I used to watch X-Files all the time, and anytime they had mood lighting, kind of creepy lighting, it was always red and blue. Red on one side of their face, blue on the other. But it also, it's very dramatic, so that's what I like to do. But blend modes give you a gradient map. So, overlay, I will show you that one first because that's the one that I use the most. There. Now, the darks and the lights are using the color underneath. So the brightest, you know, even though like in this area on the horse and the shadow, because that area is this light blue, it's going to be the darkest version of that blue. Of course, if you use a dark color, as you can see here, in the darkest darks, it's nearly black. But you can see where it lightens a little bit, there's some purple here. Another thing you could do is turn this down just so it's just barely doing something. And that's why I like to use a dark color, because when I erase out, and it's also, the opacity is down, so it's bringing in that orange underneath, that peachy color. So what it does is it's actually blending that purple and that orange together. It's a peach. And you get these kind of interesting colors in the shadows. As I move this up and down, you can really see it. So I often adjust this so that I like the middle colors, like here on her face. And then I'll go and I'll start erasing out, you know, the brightest areas. And that's why that works pretty slick. It's really fast. So that's a good way to, you know, get your stuff in there. And I really, really love the blend mode overlay for colorizing a black and white picture like that. But I mean, you can get some really interesting reflected light kind of stuff happening in here. You know, you can also draw it back in. See? Oh, I didn't like that? Okay, fix it. You know, just use a paintbrush and use that color and paint it back in there. So other blend modes, let's talk about those. Let's say, yeah, we turn this to overlay. And then let's say you wanted just a really interesting shape. Let's use a circle. And let's change the color. Do something kind of bright. We'll leave it the brush. It does matter which of these brushes you're using when you do these shapes up here. And the size of your brush, so let's bring that down. All right, and I'm just going to do a circle. Now again, it does not have a way to, I just did weird things. Okay, it does not have a way to make it a perfect circle that I have been able to find, like a gesture of some kind. So we will just stick it right there, and there it is. Looks like somebody put coffee on here. Now, because it's the one under above it is overlay, it's using what's underneath it to tell the lines, the pencil drawing, what colors to be. I'm going to turn this down a bit so you can kind of see more. Now let's change the blend modes here and just show you what some of them do. Normal is obvious, darken, it completely disappears. It uses what's underneath it. Maybe we should turn that off. So it's going to use that color plus whatever's underneath it to blend them together in a more interesting way. So darken, let's see, it kind of darkens it, but it's not a very dark color to begin with. Multiply, it multiplies that color. So it does get a little darker. Color burn, it kind of like burns the color in is the best way I can explain it. Let's see what this is if we turn that back to normal. Yeah, so you can't even see it right now because the only thing underneath it is, there we go, is the purple there. So that's color burn, linear burn, lighten, it'll be a lighter version. Screen is very similar. Color dodge, it's kind of making it brighter and desaturating it, so it's almost a white no matter what color you're using. Linear dodge is just like add you'll see in other programs, and a lot of times that's what you want for like a really bright highlight effect, like sunlight shining on something. You change that layer to the linear dodge and it'll look like it's light. I mean, it'll seem to have some kind of luminescence behind it. Now you can't tell as much here. What happens if I darken it and see if we give it a darker background too? Yeah, I mean, as we change this, it shows up a little bit. Again, now back to the reason why you need flats. If you have these other blend modes in your painting, like any kind of brush, you know, when you're painting like this, if it doesn't have a flat, it's just going to disappear because whatever's underneath it affects it. And a lot of times you want a nice flat color. Because it uses an alpha, and alpha uses black and white for its data. Using black and white for anything other than overlay kind of messes with it. It doesn't work right. And that's probably the case with all programs that have blend modes. All right, let's go back to our ring here. Now my favorite one, it's not glow, although this is very interesting, but it also really saturates the color. So it might be a little bit too much in a lot of cases. And again, it's using the color underneath to tell it, see how it changes? And if we got rid of that purple, it's almost white because it's using the brightness of whatever's underneath. But my favorite is Soft Glow, and that's the one I use. It also blends really nice. I use that when there is light on somebody's face. Especially this color is perfect for that. Now, if I did not have some kind of solid color behind there, it would change it, and sometimes it would even minimize the effect. Which brings us to tip number 5, layers. Merging them and the order you want to merge them when you have different blend modes. Let's say you were trying to do an effect along the side here of light, just kind of like a rim light around her hood here, or in the, especially in the hair. Let's say you were kind of putting that in there and then blending it a bit. That makes it more translucent. But then let's say you decided, okay, this one is gone, this peach one is not being used right now, and we'll leave the purple one on here. Now let's say you decide, and you're not going to merge the whole thing, but you're trying to minimize your layers because of, you know, you need just for space. One thing you cannot do is merge a glow layer, or really any of the blending mode layers. Overlay should always be the last one, and soft glow should be the last one, if you can even do it. Sometimes I cannot blend any of my soft glow layers until I'm doing merge all. Then it's fine, because it also uses this background color. But if I just went now and said merge with the next one, you see how it changes? That's the main reason for having these flats, is if you're using blend modes, they just don't look right. But you lose that light effect when you do it with the soft glow. So it's mainly, see how it changes? You don't have it, it doesn't stay as bright. And you need to have, it doesn't even work if you have this background one in there, I found out. It acts like that one doesn't exist. Even though you're seeing it right now, I noticed the last time I was doing something like this, I still had to come in here, even though I had the color I wanted in the background, I still had to come in here, create it, add a layer, and put it in there with the paint bucket. I still have to wait with the soft glow layers to do merge, but if I merge all, it'll be fine. In fact, I can show you right now at this point. This image has a white background, except for this blue area, but that I just painted in. But the white is the white background that I used. When I merged all and just left it that background, and just left it white, the bright highlights around the tree here, the cherry tree, the cherry blossoms, they turned just orange, or whatever color I had used. They lost their brightness because this white background wasn't really a background until I used the paint bucket and added a layer of a white background behind it. So that's just very important to remember when you're using specifically the soft glow blend mode. Now I might do it with other blend modes too, but soft glow I use a lot, and I noticed it's kind of finicky that way. Tip number 6, changing your brush settings. Now, one thing that might be a reason you don't want to use Sketchbook might be the limited amount of brushes you have, and the fact that you cannot download new brushes like you can in Procreate and other iPad art programs. But except for a few instances, I have not really run into a problem. Maybe because I have my favorites, so I tend to use them over and over. But the brushes that it comes with are really quite customizable. And you do get several. You also get different shapes, textures, patterns. And then within each brush, I'm going to pick one that I don't mind changing. This is the default right here. It's just, you know, a simple airbrush and I have the flow all the way up. But let's say you wanted kind of that fuzzy flow look, but you wanted more texture added. So you go into the settings, and the brush types, you know, they usually are standard, but then within there you have different looks. So you could, you know, the marker has a different look from the standard. The standard tends to be a little darker. And then, you know, they blend together really nice. If you're doing a different brush, standard, like this watercolor one, the standard tends to be a little flatter, and you'll get a little bit of a line when you overlap them. So you get kind of right in here, you see how you can really see your brush strokes, which is a little more digital computer drawing looking than paint looking. You can also change it to smudge. which in this case reminds me a bit like finger painting, but that's because we have the flow all the way up. I like it down further so that it just sort of, you feel like you have more control. The smudge, the eraser, is pretty self-explanatory. But you can, what's nice is you can jump to any one of these. Let's say you have a texture added like I do with this one. Now, the standard is a bit more flat looking, like I was saying. You can kind of see the texture, but not as much. Marker, it's darker, even though I have the opacity and the flow down. But you can see that texture even more. And then of course, if you use smudge with it, that texture is still applied. So, you know, as you smudge things around, you're adding a little bit of texture to it. Now, a lot of times you may not, like this, you're getting this line in here again, which, you know, depending on your style or what you want to achieve, you might want that because it kind of looks like I'm bringing water into it and adding water and just bringing the flow. So it kind of has a little bit of that bleed effect like you get with real watercolor. So sometimes you can play around with it just to achieve a certain look, but you might say not like the smudge with this brush, so then you just use a different brush for it. Eraser, again, if you keep your opacity down, your flow down, it will apply some of that texture again that you already have on the brush. And it's a nice way to just kind of jump between different modes. It's so easy to jump back and forth. The synthetic paint is different in that and I talked about this in my other video, it's like you just added paint to your brush and then it runs out. And again, the natural blend is the one I like the most. I use it most of the time, unless I need a much darker effect. Now the colorless one is a little bit confusing. Most of the time, it kind of seems like it's a smudge brush. It could be more like adding water. It does appear to be kind of like a blending brush, but it's smearing the paint around a little bit more. It's like adding water. All right, let's go back to this one. I'm going to clear this layer out. Now, right now there aren't really any, or it's a very simple texture applied. There's no texture, it's just a shape. You know, you have your basic settings here, and that's a quick way to adjust things, but I usually use these sliders instead. So in the advanced, you can change, you know, that the size is changing with your pressure and all of that. That's all pretty self-explanatory. Spacing is very interesting, because if you have, we go to the nib, if you have, see, sometimes you can just add shape and it'll give you that, you know, more brushed look, and it depends what you use. So right now it's just sort of, I mean, it's kind of an interesting texture, but it just looks like it's repeating it, which it exactly is. So I don't know how often you might use something like that. So let's change, how about the spacing? Now the spacing here, it's on 0.5, so that's why you're getting this kind of just repeating pattern here that's really close together. Let's turn the spacing down to 1. That smooths it out. Now it just sort of has a striped, maybe you could use it for hair. But let's say you want those dots to show up more. you can turn the spacing up. And now you can do this with any of these shapes. Now, maybe this looks a little bit too repetitive because they're all going the same direction. So you can change that. The roundness will, it changes the shape of the brush. See how now it's more elliptical? If I turn that back all the way to 100%, then it's round again. So that might change the look of your texture and your shape a little bit. Rotation, you can change this. Maybe you want them all going not up and down, but this direction, depending on what you're trying to create. Maybe this is a snake skin pattern or something. I mean, you could start off with something like this, and then to add some variation, take your smudge brush and just, you know, make it look a little bit more like a natural pattern, a natural animal pattern, or add something else to it. There are ones that can achieve that look even more. Now, rotation dynamics, this will have to do with how you're holding your pencil. So let's say you want to do some that are going straight up and down and some are going sideways. So depending on the direction you hold your pencil, I'm tilting it in different ways. Now I'm kind of spinning it around just to see what you get. That way you can get kind of a more varied pattern. Now the hardness, because right now we have it kind of softens on the edges, the hardness will get rid of that. If you want the pattern just to be the pattern exactly as it is, full opaqueness and everything. Is opaqueness a word? So that's the shape. And you can change the shape. There's lots to choose from. See, now we still have the stroke or the spacing wider apart. But if you bring this back, we'll turn the hardness down. See, you get different looks with all of these different brushes. So it really does give you lots and lots of choices. Let's bring this maybe right in there. See, now this gives you, you know, maybe you want some of that pattern just to show up on top so you can kind of blend it in. Maybe it's the edge of a rock cliff or something. There are different ways to achieve that though, but you know, you get to play with it, you get to choose the look you want, and there's so many different choices. Try one of these. See? Nice kind of soft, but with just a little bit of texture. Now if I change this from the standard, where it's kind of flat looking, to natural blend, we'll clear this. This is up all the way because it is, but this is a nice light wash. Make the brush nice and big. And it blends with itself really nice. You still get your brush marks a little bit, but that's why I like to come back in, and in areas where I don't really want that brushed look, I just use my smudging brush, my favorite smudging brush, and blend it out. So maybe you want it in some areas, but you don't want it in others. And just blend it out. So it's really up to you. And then if you add shape and texture, This one's a very light. It'll give you kind of a graphite effect. We'll change this back so we can see it. See if that helps. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. Let's try the marker one. Too light. There. Now you can see that texture even more. And it's only on the outside edges. If we bring down the opacity, some of it stands out. Now you can make these textures stand out even more or less. You can change their scale. So let's say you want it to have kind of a rough paper, watercolor paper look. See? If you change the brightness, just look at how you can see that texture kind of pop out even more. You can bring up the contrast, get more of a grainier effect. So this is again reacting how it reacts with your pencil. So if you want the depth to show up with your pressure, depending on how you use your pressure. And then randomness. Now this is where it's really good for those pattern type brushes and shapes. So again, I'm going to come back up here and change the spacing. So this one's a more random looking one anyway, but you can start to see that it's just a repetitive pattern. So if I go down to the randomness, you can change the size random, the opacity, and the flow, and the rotation, which is important. See, now it's flipping it around. Some are darker, some are bigger, some are brighter. So there's lots of different ways to use these different brush settings. So I suggest you just play with it, spacing again. These are really good for also these patterns or textures. And these different shape brushes. See what else we have. I have some that I put up in here that I use. I do like the star one. I have it really tiny though. See, I have this randomizing quite a bit so that you can do stars. Some will be bigger, some will be smaller, some will be brighter. I'll make it bigger just so you can see it. And then if you turn that soft glow on your layer, they will appear to be like bright stars against a dark background. Very fun. I like that one. So yeah, it's the best to just play with them, and that's the best way to learn them. If you kind of know what the look you want is, just play around in here and see what you can create with what you have available. It's a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but I like that this is so easy to use. You don't have to learn the product as much as discovering the shapes and the brushes and what you can do with them specifically. Tip number 7 are the brush blending modes. And I showed you some of that already. Now, you do have that soft glow layer blend mode, but you also have the glow in here. I'm going to darken this background, and this one tends to be a little bit brighter. So we have a darker color, this darker blue, but look how much it shines. And as you overlap your brush marks, it gets brighter. So if that glow blending mode on your layer isn't quite enough, you can always switch the brush to the glow brush mode. Let's see what we get when we have both of them on. See, you get an even brighter. So again, whatever you need to achieve, you have your options. can also play around with these other blend modes. That one disappeared. Hard light and soft light also do different things. Yeah, it's fun to just play around and see what happens, because the best part about real painting is when colors blend together and something that you had not really intended happens. And I had a teacher in college who called them happy mistakes. It's not really a mistake, it just ends up being, oh, that's really cool, I like that. And then you try to achieve it again. And that kind of happens in here, especially when you start playing around with the different blend modes, both on the layers and with the brushes. So in keeping with these different blend modes and all the ways you can play with your blobs of paint and make them look more interesting. So tip number 8, using color adjustments. Hue, saturation, and luminescence. What does that do? So you can change the hue completely. Let's say you started with a color and you don't want to redo everything you just painted. If it's not just straight up black and white, you can come in here and literally change the color. You can change how saturated it is, how gray it is, and how bright it is. Turn on a better color. I like blues. You might notice here too that even though I'm in the red, it's turning green. That's because the color was a blue to begin with. And as you go over these colors, it's actually going into the opposite. It's removing some of that color from it and adding its opposite hue, I think. The other one, the color balance, is just adjusting this color that you already have without completely changing it. So we have midtones, highlights, and shadows here. So if we do the shadow, it's only going to change the darkest areas. So now we are adding more red, and it does change the whole thing. It's not like a straight up, lightest areas are not going to change. It's kind of changing it lightly. See, now I'm bringing more cyan into it. And you can do that with all of these. So this is a more controlled way of adjusting your colors. Highlights. See, now you don't see a lot changing in here because it's only looking for the brightest areas. Add more green. Let's say you want it more of an aqua blue. You can add more green, add a little bit more of this, and maybe a little bit more blue. See? So that's always fun to play with. And of course, these midtones, highlights, and shadows in this particular glob of paint is not very extreme. There's not that much contrast happening. So you're not seeing a huge difference between the lights and the darks. Tip number 9, perspective grids. Now, this is something that was added in the last few months after I did my last feature video. We can turn this on here and I will just give you a quick overview. I don't have a ton of experience with these just because I don't draw as many straight lines. I like curvy lines and shapes. But these are very handy for just getting down some basic lines so you can, if you want to do buildings and more architecture type images, these can at least help guide you so you're not just trying to eyeball it and guess where your vanishing points are. So if you don't know a lot about perspective, there's probably several videos online about it, but basically you have your most simplest form, which is the one vanishing point. And now with this, you can move it around, you can spin it. So let's say you want this middle line here that's slightly lighter blue, that is your vanishing point, or that is your horizon line. And then the blue line on it, everything disappears or angles towards that as it moves away from you. So maybe you're doing comic book and you want, you know, to make it look like your camera's tilted a bit. You know, you want to force perspective, you want to give it some extreme angles. You can do that. So what you do here, you can adjust the size and where if you just grab the center point here, that's how you can move it around. You grab the green ones to change the shape, and this one to this little circle one here to move it around, to spin it. You can also adjust by doing this middle one, the customize grid. You can add more lines to it. You can change the opacity so it's not distracting. But as you can see here now, if I go to try to draw on it, let me get my pencil out. Let me get black here. And then if I just start drawing it, I'm like, well, my lines are so crooked, I can't get a nice straight line. Oh, and there's a building here, and it should go like that, and here's the ground, the street level right here, and maybe these are storefronts, and you want this to kind of come out a little, so maybe it's got an awning or a sign area. And you're just like, it looks all sketchy and ugly. So what you can do, and then if you oh dang it, now I moved the whole thing, right? So it has this lock here. So once you get everything set up the way you like it, tap this little lock button up here, and it'll lock it in place. So now at least it won't move if you accidentally, you know, go over one of those areas. Now, my lines are still not very straight. I'm not good at drawing straight lines. My hands shake sometimes. So how do you fix that? Well, there's this little magnet button here. You can make sure it's on. And now, no matter where you draw, now it's very important where you place your pencil to start with, because that's where it will use the location and where the vanishing point should go from there. So you can't draw real sketchy. You have to be very careful. See how it's, because of where I placed it back there, it's not lining up perfectly with that line. But that's okay, because this is just a guide. But now, because I'm going down, I can't, if I move side to side, nothing happens without lifting my pencil. Now if I lift my pencil, it will change again. So you need to be very careful. You know, if I move and I'm over here, oops, that's not where I wanted. You have to make sure you line things up. Now, I believe the last time I played with this, if you have more grid lines, it has more things to snap to. It has more lines to snap to, so you know, you want to just sort of, you don't want to be sketchy, see? You don't, otherwise it makes your lines look a little hairy. Now this one, it seems to be doing a better job than the last time I played with this. So they either fixed something, or it's just because this is the simplest version of a grid that you can have. So the other grids, let me just quick give you a rundown of them. The second one is 2 vanishing points. We'll turn off the lock. So this again to rotate your horizon line. Now if you don't know much about this, about perspective drawing, what the 2-point vanishing does is, let's say you are on a street corner looking at the building right in front of you, and the building goes off to 2 different streets. So if you think of this line right here, where this is going up and down, that is the corner. And so now you have 2 vanishing points. And you get this nice little arrow showing you where it is if you have to go off your page because of the angles. You need them a little bit closer. There. So now if I hit lock, it's not going to move. I can start drawing. Here is my, make it thicker, corner. Here's the bottom of the box or the building and the top. See, now let's say I want to draw up here. I could still do that. Oh, wait, what happened? There we go. So it doesn't just have to be on the grid at all times. Oh, now see, it kind of switched and went down, so it's not quite what I intended. But you get the idea. So this is really good for, let's say you have a checkered pattern on your ground, you know? That's really complicated to try to eyeball it. So that's kind of nice. Put in your windows. Oops, that one didn't go where I wanted, so I hit undo. Make sure I'm angling it the right way. So it really has a lot to do with how you place your pencil, and try not to lift your lines. Now this is just to get the basic shape down. It's not going to be a good idea to now, oh, okay, I want all these little details in here and stuff, you know. It's not going to really let you do that. You can turn off the snapping and maybe, okay, I need this curvy area here, and maybe there's a nice little decoration up here above the window, you know. So you just, I mean, it's not going to do it for you. You still have to have some knowledge and see some of it, imagine it correctly for yourself to some extent. But this is nice for a guide. So that's the 2 vanishing points. Now 3-point perspective is a little bit more complicated, especially the way this grid looks, but I played around with it. Now this is, let's say you are in New York or any other big city that has very tall buildings, and you are standing, let's make these a little bit more extreme. You are standing on a street corner. So these blue ones are your vanishing points again. And this is your actual grid, the green ones. So you are not only you're on a street corner looking up at a giant building, you have your 2 different streets going off in different directions towards the horizon line. So you got the corners, but it's also very tall. So it's disappearing as it goes up into the sky and it gets thinner. So now if we lock this and we start drawing, we've got our corner. See, I started in a funny position, so I'm going to do that. We've got your corner. We've got the street level lines. And then we've got the far lines on the other side of this rectangle, or whatever you want to call it, square shape. So these should actually go the other way, because there, like that. There. So it gives you, you know, some really interesting forced perspective kind of looks. Okay, now let's say you're like, oh, this grid is in my way, but I don't want to lose it. You can just turn it on and off. Let's see if they still work. I haven't ever tried that before. Yeah, so, you know, you can just start drawing, but you still have to be wary of where you're placing your lines. And it's still just following. It's not going any, you know, which way. So you just have to, that one was weird. See, so sometimes it's a little bit finicky about how you're placing your pencil, what it thinks you're trying to achieve and do, and you know. But it works. It's good, great for a guide. We'll turn that back on. This one, middle one, is to customize all of the lines. Maybe you don't want as many. And this middle one is crazy. Okay, let's turn off that so we get our points. Let's bring this in. I'm going to bring this up. This is if you just want, like, I don't know, maybe it's a crazy space battle and you need some straight lines for your ships, and I don't even know where here they are. You have all your different, I don't even know where to start with this one. Obviously this long one is your horizon line, but what does it do for, yeah, it's the same customizing points, but let's lock it and just see. You can have one here and one there, and that one wants to go that way. I'm having trouble getting it to go down at an angle here. Can't really see what I'm hitting, but there. I have to be maybe on this side of this point to go this direction. So that's interesting. And if I'm on the top part, it wants to go up. And this one, same thing, depends what side you're on. So those are good for just, I don't know, something crazy. Something that isn't just a box. All right. Something else you can play around with to try to get like an idea of how it works. So let's say you have a building you want to create. We'll go into my photos, we'll get this one. Okay, we'll make this bigger. Still want to make it bigger, so I hit done and then hit the transform again, then I can stretch it out even more. It's like it has a limit on how much you can stretch it each time. Let's put that under that layer. Now we can bring our grid and let's say, so this one's a 2-point. So you can play around and like bring buildings in and just see if you can line things up. So we got the corner of the building right here. Let's bring this bigger. So we'll put that here. And then it goes off. Your horizon line must be about here. There isn't really one in this image. Let's bring that away. So you can play around with trying to line things up here. Maybe it's more of a 3-point because of the camera angle. So this middle line's not going to line up exactly with both of these because this is inset a little further. Okay, let's bring this up here. We'll line it up with the bottom of the inside part of the building. That might be easier. See, it changes when I change one. So maybe it should be one of these other lines. It's kind of weird. There's probably a bit of there. Wait. Okay, that's probably it right there. So now let's say you wanted to practice drawing this. Let's make this disappear a little bit so we can see our lines. Why do I still, there we go. See, now strangely it's not letting me draw that top line. It's just there. It's kind of acting strange. See, now if you're trying to draw lines that are too close together, I notice that's where it seems to have some issues. See, now it doesn't want to let me draw that bottom edge. So maybe our horizon line needs to be higher. There, that seems to work a little bit better. Yeah, so it really depends where your horizon lines are. This is a very weird camera angle, so it doesn't seem to line up perfectly, but weird that it doesn't want to give me this straight line. There we go. It really depends where you're putting your pencil. So use these as your guides. I can't really do that curve, but don't use them as your only options, because let's see, let's give it more dense and see if that helps us a little, or maybe it makes it harder. See, it wants to be closer to the lines in some cases. And some of these, because they follow a different so, you know, you just have to kind of play with it. There's this corner, this corner. See, it makes me have to start it closer to that before it lets me draw that inside edge here. There we go. Kind of weird. So these, I mean, I don't know if these are little bits, you know, bugs. Oh, if you have to erase something, you need to literally turn the grid off, because otherwise it just wants to follow the grid line, and you might not be able to erase it the way you want. So yeah, just kind of use it as a guide, not as the only way to draw it, because some of it might act a little goofy. You know, and if you have lines that don't follow those grid lines, you can always bring your ruler in. Oops. There we go. Oops, I'm still an eraser there. You know, and just put these in. So, you know, do what feels comfortable and what makes sense to you. So, there. That's using the perspective grids. That's about all I can do. Hey, we're almost done with this. If you stick around through the last tip, I'll have a bonus tip for you. Now on to tip number 10, resizing your images. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're not sure about your composition and you have your drawing here that you kind of finished, and you decided, I don't know how I'm going to get other images in here. You can either draw them all and kind of have them simple and then work with them, but at the same time, I want this image nice and big because it's easier to draw these details. I don't want to scale down my guide drawing, you know, my reference, my simple line drawing that I used to fill in here. I want it big to start with and then resize it and fit it in the whole composition. And that's actually what I did. That's actually what I did with this other image. I did two separate pictures. I did this one with the horse, I did this guy here, and then I started putting them in here, and then I painted them with the color. And actually he was a little bit bigger, and then I didn't like how big he was, so I made him even smaller. But you don't want to do that too much. So that's why I did separate images and then copy and paste them into a new document that will be the final document. The reason you have to be careful with resizing your finished drawings, I will show you why, because this is just a copy and it's not going to ruin it. So let's say I'm like, okay, now I need this smaller. Let's bring her down like this. We'll put her in over here. Okay, done. I hit done, right? That sets it, that saves it like that. But then I'm like, oh wait, she's way too small. So I'll go back in here and I resize it up again. I hit done. I zoom in. You don't see a difference yet, but the more you do this, there's a slight difference, but the more you do this, it's compressing your picture each time. I found this out with my last drawing that I did with the speed art time-lapse one on YouTube with the Native American and all of that, the warrior ones. The Native American one, I didn't like where he was placed on the page, so I kept resizing him, and he started to get fuzzy looking, and the details were not nice and clear anymore. All those pencil lines I had drawn here, you can really start to see this now. See, it doesn't even let me bring it up any larger than this. So if I zoom in now, it's starting to get a little fuzzier, especially in the fine lines in the details. because every time you resize it, it's changing its pixel ratio too. So the more I do it, you know, let's say, let's put her over here. Let me look at the whole thing. No, I don't like that again. Let's bring her back over here. I mean, if you're not sure what you want and you end up doing this, you know, especially if you want it to eventually be a poster. Now I'm really seeing the difference now. It's kind of like when you took or created a really nice picture, and then you uploaded it to Facebook to share it, and then you're like, oh, that's not what it looked like at all. You can't see this, and the details, you know, are all muddy and fuzzy. Even though you uploaded to HD, it still looks terrible. That's because Facebook compresses everything you put on there, even if you tell it you want it HD. So, you know, be very aware of your playing around with your image after you've created and done all the work. So that's why I wanted it big to work with. So I did it on a separate document. She's crooked, let's fix her. It also sets your rotation and the scales, you know, every time you hit done. So now it thinks I've got it rotated at 8 degrees, even though it's actually back to 0 now. So it takes the last time. So every time you do this, it's saved, and it takes the last time and just changes it from that, which is why it keeps recompressing it too every time you adjust it. So that can be annoying if you forget. I ran into that problem myself. All right. You stuck around, you get a bonus tip. Yay! Okay, so we played around with brushes and settings and all the different customizations you can do with the brushes that are available to you, but every now and then you might still be like, oh, I just can't get the shape I want. I ran into that problem with my last image when I was playing around with this one, and I wanted a couple things. I wanted a more cloud burst look, especially in these bright lit up areas here, kind of more cloud-like than nebulous looking, and none of them were quite, I couldn't really find something. Even if I just painted clouds myself and then blended them and erased, I couldn't get them to look natural. And I have Procreate, which is a great program. It's just got kind of a learning curve, and I'm always having to search how to do something. So that's why I don't jump to that. Now they have made some improvements to the main complaint I had, and that was the brush settings. No matter what I did, I would always get that line every time I tried, was overlapping my brush strokes, and I hated that. That's why I like this program so much, because of that brush mode of natural blend. It feels more like real paint, and no matter what I tried, I could not get that with the Procreate brushes. But let's say you want something that you just can't get with the sketchbook brushes. So let's say you have Procreate, and I don't remember how much this costs now, but I think when we bought this, it was only $10. It was like $9.99. So that was, that's really a good deal. If it still is that much, that's really great, because they have a lot that this one can do. I have nothing against this. It's just not my favorite program to use. You can download brushes to this. They can be Photoshop brushes. You can find free ones all over the place. I have an account with Daz Studio. I don't know if it's something you're familiar with, but it's a program. It's actually a free program, but the assets you have to pay for, most of them. It's got like third-party creators that make stuff for it. And it's a 3D art program. And it's one of the programs I use to make my models for my reference pictures. That can be saved for another video. It's a lot more complicated work process. And it's on the main computer, not the iPad that you do it in. But they also sell brushes on there. And a long time ago, I purchased these brushes. This one's called Angel Dust, and it comes with all of these. And they're actually for Photoshop, but it's really easy to import Photoshop brushes into Procreate. So let's say, and Procreate has a lot of nice brushes on its own. So there's some good like cloud bursts and sparkles and all of that in here. Oops, need a new layer. I can do the simple stuff in this. If you want to get more complicated, I can't show you that. I like blue. I'm gonna go to blue. There we go. Let's say you just can't quite get this here, or your cloud pattern. I'm gonna go to the cloud pattern because that one's pretty. But this is a brush I purchased, part of a whole set. And it came with tons of them. See, I mean, just, it's also where I got that circle one, this one, and I have a bunch of these too. Just for added elements to your picture. But if you go to elements, there's clouds here, and they're already set to be illuminated. You can change them in here. What they've changed that made is it more like the natural blend mode in Sketchbook is this intense blending. They didn't used to have that. So that made it a little bit easier for me to use, but I still, just because I'm used to Sketchbook now, I still jump to that one. So, okay, clouds, yay. I have my clouds. Looks like smoke. You can make them bigger for, you know, this is just the setting I had, so I wanted them more like a light, so I'm not going to change that. So I want some new colors. Add some red. Maybe it's like a fire. There. You're like, I want this in my other picture on Sketchbook I'm working on. How do I do that? How do I use these brushes there? Well, you can't actually use them there, but you can create your element in Procreate, right? And then make sure you're on that layer, and you go over here to the settings, which is this little wrench button, actions, I guess. You don't copy canvas. I'm not sure, that probably does everything including the background. You just want copy, and it will, see now it copied the layer, and now you can just leave this program, jump back to Sketchbook. I need to go back to what I was working on. Here we go. Open this. Add a new layer. Go to your layer options and hit paste. And there it is. You can adjust it and turn it and duplicate it and do whatever you need to. Basically treat it like a stamp. You can even play around a little bit with your colors if it's not quite right. Same way as everything else. That's just adjusting colors. Let's reset. Go to the other one. See how we change the, see? Oh, that's cool. It's kind of a neat effect as I change it. So, you know, make it more gray, darkens it too. And it actually copies the blend mode, even though it doesn't say that this layer has a blend mode on it. So let's say I wanted to add glow, it'll make it even brighter. Add is the one I think it had automatically set to that brush. But you can play around with these again and do different fun things. Yeah, overlay is basically colorizing what's underneath. There. So there's your bonus tip for the day. I hope these help you in learning Sketchbook. There's, you know, a lot of great things about Sketchbook, but it also has some drawbacks. But there usually are workarounds, and you know, these might help you find some of those workarounds and just play with it, and you know, don't be afraid to play with it. You can't break it. I always feel like I could break Procreate, so I get nervous about trying to figure things out with that one. But Sketchbook, for some reason, I don't feel that way. It feels very intuitive, and everything's kind of very easy to find, so that's why I like using Sketchbook. So I'll catch you next time, and be sure to like and subscribe if this was helpful to you, and stay creative.